Hi Year 11 and welcome to your A-Level English Literature Taster lesson. My name is Miss Sainsbury and I'm one of the English teachers here at Ashton Park. What you've got on the slide in front of you is some of the ideas from some of the writers that we're going to be studying at A-Level English Literature, just really exploring and explaining the importance and the value of literature, language, ideas, and the relation to ourselves, culture, and society. So, what does it mean to become an English literature student? In many ways, a lot of you are already English literature students, and that started right from when you were a child, a baby, enjoying stories, songs, learning to read and sharing those stories with those around you. This then developed as you became a student in secondary school or even primary school, where you developed those skills, began being able to spot patterns between genres and forming your own opinions about texts that you were being taught. The stage you've just left is the stage at GCSE, where you were really developing those analytical skills independently, thinking about context, high-level skills, and high-level texts as well. And then what we're moving on to is obviously the idea of an A-level student. Now, at A-level, the biggest difference is that those analytical skills are then joined with critical skills, where we're exploring theories and contexts about a range of challenging, classic, and culturally significant texts to link to your own interpretations and your own ideas as well. The range of texts that we're going to be studying are really vibrant, they're significant, they're important, and the skills that you'll be developing will hopefully take you on into the next stage of your lives. So as an English literature student, you will hopefully continue to love literature as an adult. It may take you into your further education or even complement some of your other subjects. So, for example, literature can be seen as a complementary subject to anything from history to psychology to art to languages, but also into your career. Now, you might use English literature explicitly in your career, maybe as a writer or a teacher, but you would also use it as within any other career as well. A lot of employers see it as a really valuable skill, and hopefully you'll understand why. And then obviously moving further on away from English literature as a subject and more into English literature as a pastime, just making sure that you guys continue that love of language, love of stories, sharing those with those around you, and obviously getting used to and continuing to appreciate settling down with a good book and a cup of tea on a rainy afternoon. So A-level English literature is it's slightly different to English literature at GCSE, but some of the skills will feel very familiar. So throughout the course, you will be encouraged to read widely and independently, really challenging texts, really interesting texts from the canon, which is what we consider to be novels, plays, stories from the that we would consider classics, but also modern classics, new classics, texts that really represent our culture and society in the 21st century. As I just mentioned, one of the main things you'll be doing, and we will practice today, is engaging critically and creatively with those texts. It's really a challenging and exciting skill to be able to think about what other people think of text and how other people interpret literature and apply that to our own understanding and our own interpretations. Obviously, we'll build on the skills that you had at GCSE. That's the idea of literary analysis and evaluation. So identifying writers' methods and devices and being able to critique them and explore the impact and meaning on the reader or audience. And then we'll really be thinking as well about context. We do that a lot more at A-level, thinking about how the social, cultural, political and historical culture and context influence our understanding of the text, our interpretations of the text, and why the text was written. So what we're going to do then today is a little bit of a taster of what of this higher level skill that you guys might not have interacted with before. You guys already know how to read a text, select interesting words, have interesting ideas about it, closely analyze and explore those texts and form discussions and link to context. The new skill is the application of critical theory. So what I'd like you to do first and foremost is have a read of this story of the Three Little Pigs. This is a story that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. I'm sure a lot of you know the gist of the story, with the big bad wolf huffing, puffing, blow the house down. Obviously, this is not a high-level text, but it is still a literary text. That means it is a fiction text from which we can learn and through which we can analyse specific ideas. So just pause the video now and have a go at reading that and just remind yourself of the story. It should take you a couple of minutes. Okay, so if we were just at GCSE level and we were just exploring and exploding this particular text, we could look at things to do with the language choices. So we would look at things like the alliteration of Big Bad Wolf, maybe the structural device of meeting a fairy tale, the conventions of a fairy tale, Once Upon a Time, the sound patterning, onomatopoeia of huff and puff, the emotive language, terrified, and some of the structural devices in terms of the sentence forms and syntax that the writer has used. However, as A-level students, what we're going to do is we're going to apply critical theories. So what is critical theory? A critical theory is essentially when we apply a lens or a filter over any text and it allows us to focus on something in more specific detail. Okay, so essentially what you've got is any text, we're going to use the Three Little Pigs, we're going to look at it with a specific focus, zooming in on keywords and methods and devices, but as we normally would, but as it says at the bottom there, now we will think about how other people's ideas about society, history, literature, and wider culture affect our interpretations of the text. So the first one we're going to look at, we're only going to look at three. There are many different literary theories, but we're only going to look at three. The first one we're going to look at is Marxist theory. Now, Marxist theory is named after Karl Marx, who developed the Communist Manifesto at the end of the 19th century. And his belief was in socialism, was in the power of the working classes, and he believed that the upper classes, in this case the aristocracy, abused their power over the working classes. Now, when we apply that to literature, what that means is, I'm just going to read the blue box to you here, literature is always a product of a particular time and class structure. It is always political, and it exposes and reveals inherent power struggles in society. The upper class, aristocracy, and middle class, bourgeoisie, use their money and power to take control, commodify, the working class and proletariat. So when we're reading a text, we're essentially asking the big question, what are we focusing on? We're focusing on the presentation and criticism of class, money, and power. Have a little read of the questions that are at the bottom of the slide. All right, these are the questions that you're going to be asking yourself and asking of the text in a moment independently. You're going to reread the text and think about what social classes are presented or represented if they are not explicitly there. Who has power and status and money and who doesn't? What values are reinforced or subverted? I'm going to help you out with this one because it's the first one, but have a little think, if you're making notes, write a little subheading of Marxist theory, and then just jot down the idea of who has power. Hopefully it should be quite explicit, it should be quite easy to spot that the individual with power in this one is the big bad wolf. So a Marxist theorist would look at this and say the big bad wolf is a representation of the upper classes, the aristocracy, taking everything they want, assuming power, doing everything they can to belittle and to control the proletariat, which in this case would be the pigs, the lower classes who have to work. Now, you could argue that even within the Three Little Pigs narrative, there are further class structures because the Three Little Pigs build their houses out of different materials, straw, sticks, and bricks. Which one of those do you reckon is a representation of which of the pigs has more money and power? So what I'd like you to do is have a little think about the Three Little Pigs story, pause the video here and see if you can answer those questions that are on the left-hand side. Okay, so the next theory that we're going to have a look at is, again, one that you might be familiar with, but maybe you've never heard it called psychoanalytical theory. This is sometimes called Freudian theory as well. Now, this is the idea, and this will really help if you are studying psychology as an A-level as well, because the two go hand in hand. This is the idea where we take the theories of psychologists such as Sigmund Freud or Carl Jung, and we apply them to literary texts. Freud believed that people have desires which are often sexual and have previously been denied or repressed because of social conventions and personal circumstance. Okay, so the desires don't go away, and literature allows us to express and understand these unconscious desires and repressed needs. This means that when we are reading the text, we are looking for representations of desires and repression, but also our subconscious, so things that are to do with the way that we are controlled either by society or by ourselves and our memories of our past. So, similar situation, pop a little heading of psychoanalytical theory, and for about 3 minutes or so, have a reread of the text and think about what desires or dreams are evident. What roles do different characters' conscience play? Who's in control in terms of the family dynamics? Are there any words that imply a desire, possibly even linked to a sexual desire? For example, I can help you out with this one. Some of you might, when in your study of English literature at GCSE, you might have come across the term phallic imagery. Now, that would be normally used when we're talking about something like Macbeth or Romeo and Juliet. A phallic image is an image that represents male genitalia. So you could argue that a chimney is a representation of a phallic image. Okay. So have a little read of this. What desires are driving the characters, and how are they controlling or acting on those desires? Are they trying to repress them, or are those desires becoming evident? Pause the video here and have a little go at that one. Okay, so the third theory that we're going to have a look at is, again, something you guys are probably familiar with in some way, shape, or form. Feminist theory focuses on, as it says, the idea that literature can reinforce or undermine economic, political, social, and psychological oppression of women. It explores the belief that society is patriarchal, which means dominated by men. And again, you should have experienced that word at GCSE literature. And that literature has always reflected this, because of the inherent power structures in society. It explores the portrayal of women in literary works, how language is biased towards male dominance and the marginalization of women, and unequal representation of gender issues, from reproduction to roles in the workforce. So when we're looking at text, we're saying, well, how has the role of women and gender been presented and critiqued? In this particular text, there might be something really glaringly obvious. You could argue that women aren't there at all. Have they been marginalized, or have they just been completely written out? Women or female characters must have existed for this story to take place, not least because the pigs and the wolf would have all needed a mother, and yet they don't exist in the story. Why is that? If you have a little look through this story, you will also be able to see that there are a few references to gender, and we can see that particularly through the references to male pronouns, so him, he, and his. But you should be able to see that those male pronouns are only in relation to the wolf. The pigs in this story do not have a gender assigned to them, but we as readers have assumed maybe a gender, that they are pigs, possibly because that's what they look like in all our storybooks from when we were way back as early literature students, just experiencing nursery rhymes for the first time. And a feminist theorist would look at that and try and question it and try and work out why. We could argue that the pigs are representations of a male gender, but because there's no definitive male or female pronoun, we could also argue that they are female pigs. And does that change our interpretation of this story and of who the big bad wolf is and what he could be attempting and trying to do? So, the key thing that I want you to look at with this one, when you pause the video in a minute, is what's the relationship between men and women? Which gender or sex has the most power? What message is being given about the role of women? Okay, and if we assume that women aren't represented, why? But if they are being represented, how are they being represented? And a really interesting one as well here is, if we assume that all of these characters, the three pigs and the wolf, are male, do any of them take on traits that we would maybe assume to be female? Which of these pigs is maybe a bit more feminine in its characteristics and actions than the others? And why do you reckon that is? And what do we learn about that? Pause the video here and see if you can unpick some of that, particularly looking for key words, such as the male pronouns, and thinking about representations of gender roles. Pause the video and have a go. Okay, so what we've got here are 3 interpretations of 3 Little Pigs, and you're going to pause the video and have a quick read of it and see if you can work out which one is feminist, Marxist, or psychoanalytical. Okay, so just jot down 1, 2, 3 and see if you can work out which is which. There are clues in the first sentences for each one, but do make sure that you read the whole paragraph. Pause the video and have a go. Okay, let's see if you were correct. So number 1 is a representation of a Marxist critical application of theory. All right, we've got the keyword in the first sentence of bourgeoisie, but then it goes on to talk about materialism, property, money, capitalism, power, and status. Okay. The second one is an example of psychoanalytical theory. We've got the keyword in the first sentence of repressed or repression, but then we've also got other ideas about phallic symbols. We've got ideas about security, desire to return to the womb, and what an individual is sort of desirous of and what they are seeking and how they go about acting on those desires. And then finally, number 3 is an example of a feminist interpretation. We've got the keyword patriarchal, but then we've also got that continued discussion of women, female, the idea of the hero versus the sort of the damsel in distress who needs saving, and the patriarchal values reigning supreme there. The idea that the male character, the overtly male character, is dominant even at the end of the story. So hopefully you got 3 out of 3, and hopefully you can see that from one text we've been able to explore lots of different ideas. So the structure of the course I'm not going to go through in a lot of detail, but essentially what we've got is a real range and a real opportunity. Okay, we do have the first unit, component 1, is like the older unit. We study a Shakespearean text, really focusing on the context and critical appreciation of that text, and then we also study poetry and drama from before 1900. Second component is a deep dive into American literature of the turn of the century, so 1880 to 1940. You'll study 2 novels in full, but you'll also gain a real appreciation of the genre in total, looking at extracts from a range of authors, novelists, playwrights, writers from that time period. And then the coursework, which you will complete in Year 12 and have done by about Christmas of Year 12, as it's only 20% of your course, is close analysis of a contemporary poet, so Kay Tempest. Some of you might have seen some of her Glastonbury performances, as I think she performed at the Brit Awards recently as well, and also 2 modern dystopian texts, and those are 2 separate essays. We'll of course talk you through that in September. You don't need to worry about that now, but ultimately what you should hopefully be able to see is that there's a real range of old and contemporary drama and prose. You've got poetry as well. You've got a real range of stuff, and the real emphasis is on you guys developing those independent skills. So what's next? Over the summer, the main thing that we'd like you to do is make sure you are reading. Read as much as you possibly can. Reread books that you've loved. Start reading new books. There's no requirement for you to read ahead for the course. Just make sure you are discussing the books that you enjoy and really developing that ability to read quickly, to read actively, and to form your own opinions. If you have any questions about the course at all, please email me. My name's Miss Sainsbury and my email address is there. And the other English Literature A-level teacher is Mr. Bittles, and his email address is there. We really look forward to hearing from you, and really looking forward as well to teaching you in September. Have a great summer and see you then.